For decades, we've heard one simple message: fear the sun, right? Cover up, find shade, load up on the sunscreen. But what if that advice, as well-intentioned as it is missing a huge piece of the puzzle? So today, we're going to dive into the incredibly complex and honestly super surprising relationship we have with sunlight. Look, I know this is a provocative question. It pretty much goes against everything we've been taught for a long time. But, there's this growing pile of research that's forcing us to ask, has our fear of the sun actually created a whole new set of dangers? And this is not some fringe theory we're talking about. Just take a look at this massive 20-year study of almost 30,000 Swedish women. The results? They were absolutely staggering. They found that women who actively avoided the sun had a mortality rate about 2 times higher than the women who got the most sun. That's right, double the risk of dying from any cause. So what on earth is going on here? Okay, before we get carried away, we have to start with the established facts. Because look, those public health warnings aren't just made up. The case against unprotected sun exposure is built on a really solid foundation of science, starting with the very real danger of skin cancer. And they're not mincing words. The World Health Organization is crystal clear on this. UV radiation is a known carcinogen. And for millions of people, this isn't about a fun day at the beach. It's a daily hazard they face just by showing up to work.
I mean, just think about who we're talking about here. These are the people building our cities, growing our food, keeping our communities safe. For them, the sun isn't really a choice. It's just a constant part of their job. And that exposure adds up year after year after year.
And when you look at the numbers, man, they're stark. Research from the WHO found that being exposed to UV on the job raises a worker's risk of non-melanoma skin cancer by a whopping 60%. And get this, work-related sun exposure is responsible for 1 out of every 3 deaths from this type of cancer. So yeah, the danger is absolutely real. But, and this is a big but, as that Swedish study showed us, this is not the whole story. While we're so focused on the risks of getting too much sun, we might be completely ignoring the dangers of getting too little. It turns out there's all this new evidence suggesting that sunlight has some powerful, beneficial effects that go way beyond what we normally think.
When most of us think about the sun being good for you, our brains immediately jump to vitamin D. And yeah, of course, that's crucial for our bones and our immune system. But what scientists are finding now is that sunlight actually kicks off this whole cascade of other vital processes in our bodies that have nothing to do with vitamin D.
Yeah, this stuff is fascinating. For starters, when UV light hits our skin, it triggers the release of something called nitric oxide into our bloodstream. This stuff is a powerful vasodilator, meaning it helps our blood vessels relax, which can lower blood pressure and protect our heart. Then our skin actually produces mood-boosting endorphins in response to UV rays, which totally explains that great feeling you get after spending a little time in the sun. And finally, UV light can actually tweak our immune system, which might be why it's used as a therapy for autoimmune diseases like psoriasis and even MS. And all of this brings us right back to the conclusion from that huge Swedish study. The researchers themselves literally warned that in places with less intense sun, like Scandinavia, telling people to completely avoid the sun could actually be doing more harm than good. So what they're saying is, hey, there's a serious trade-off here we need to think about. Okay, so this is where things get really, really complicated, especially when we start talking about melanoma, which is the most dangerous type of skin cancer. The data here is, well, it's surprisingly contradictory. It really messes with that simple idea that more sun just means more melanoma. So researchers have found what they call an exposure paradox, and it's pretty weird. It seems like the pattern of how you get sun is just as important as the total amount. So intermittent, intense sun exposure, think of an office worker who gets totally fried on a 1-week tropical vacation, that's consistently linked to a higher risk of melanoma. But chronic, continuous sun exposure, like what a farmer or a groundskeeper gets every day, is often linked with a lower risk of melanoma. How weird is that? Okay, so to get this next part, we need to quickly talk about something called Breslow thickness. All it is, basically, is a measurement of how deep a melanoma tumor has grown into the skin, and it's one of the most critical things for predicting the outcome. The thinner the melanoma, the better the chances of survival. So, keeping that in mind, get this. An Italian study of over 2,700 melanoma patients found something absolutely astonishing. Taking holidays with sun exposure in the years before they were diagnosed with melanoma was actually associated with having a thinner, less dangerous tumor.
Now, does this prove cause and effect? No, of course not. But what it does do is show that the whole sun and melanoma story is way, way more complicated than we thought.
So, where does all this leave us? Well, the point here isn't to just declare the sun good or bad. It's to see that the science itself is evolving, moving away from a simple warning and into a much more complex, much more nuanced conversation. And that's exactly what a lot of researchers are calling for now. This is a recent statement from some of the same people who did that big Swedish study, and they're arguing that we need a more balanced message, one that acknowledges the very real dangers of getting too much sun, but also the potential benefits we're missing out on. And really, this gets to the heart of the whole dilemma. Our laser focus on preventing skin cancer might be unintentionally increasing our risk of dying from other major killers, like cardiovascular disease, which is the #1 cause of death in the world. The huge challenge for public health is figuring out how to find that balance. So we're left with this ultimate question, aren't we? How do we personally weigh the risks against the rewards? The science is showing us this incredibly complex trade-off. There is no easy answer here, but one thing is becoming very clear. Our relationship with the sun is one of the most important and maybe most misunderstood health equations of our time. And maybe, just maybe, it's time we all stepped out of the shadows for a moment to reconsider it.